Hi, I'm Brad Howard from The Property Educator. Thanks for joining us today. I've got a special guest that I'd like to introduce you to. His name's David Sims. Now, David, I've known for a long time. In his previous life, he's been a top salesperson. He ran his own property services company and sold that. Now he's a mortgage broker and has been awarded in the industry for his efforts. I see him as a guy who's got wisdom beyond his years and can cater for all markets, young or old. So he's a great asset in the industry. So I've invited him along today just to talk about a few things about mortgage broking and something to try and also realign people's beliefs about mortgage broking industry and get a better understanding of it, because we tend to get a message a lot from banks on how they do things. But it's something when I've invested, I've always used a mortgage broker because I found them so much better to deal with. But just so you've got an understanding, it might be the first time you're going to get a home loan or investment loan, or the second or third, or even get a bigger deal that you need to get across the line. So I'm just going to ask David a few questions today, and David will be open to answering them, and we'll go from there. So David, just first of all, where do you see the current property market? Now, whether you look at a micro level being just WA, or you look at a macro level of around the country, from what you're seeing in the industry, where do you see the market at the moment?
I guess the market everywhere is different, but I guess what we see in WA specifically, because obviously that's where I'm based, is that generally speaking that's probably in a bit of a lull. You're seeing people more shy away from investment purchases and probably more look at really strong deals for their own home. So they might be moving up to a better house because it's a good time to do that. Some of my clients are in this sort of situation where they're taking a bit of a hit on their owner occupied, so they're not selling it at the price they want, but they're buying really well in a place that might be potentially have better growth in the years to come. So
that idea of is if you're buying and selling in the same market, people are quite comfortable with that?
Yeah, I think it's all about opportunity, or what the person perceives as an opportunity. They might be moving. So again, I'm thinking about one client in particular, they're moving because of schools. So the kids want to go to a really good school, so they're prepared to take that hit, maybe even increase their loan or whatever to go to that area, and I think that's really sort of what they're doing. That sort of market still is there, and that's owner occupied. People want to live in a house.
Yeah. So have you seen anything from, let's say, the other side of the country? Have you dealt with any clients there that you might see how things are progressing in the other side of the country?
Yeah. So I have a few clients that are some that live over east, but also some people that invest over east from WA, looking for obviously a market that's better than necessarily where they're experiencing at the moment. And I've seen a bit in some stuff in Queensland seems to be relatively popular because of the pricing. I think it's still priced relatively affordable levels, like the debt isn't too high, or the property price isn't too high. I think Sydney, obviously we know it's going good, and I can see my counterparts that are part of the mortgage broking business doing really well in the east, in Sydney specifically. Probably Melbourne. Melbourne, I've had some clients that are trying to get some stuff in Melbourne. I've had some issues with valuations where the properties are getting valued lower. Probably specifically more the apartments.
So you're seeing there might be a bit of an oversupply of apartments?
Yeah, I mean, we read about it in the news.
Sure.
And I guess it's just the reality of actually the ground level of saying, okay, yes, we can see that the numbers actually show that the valuers are a little cautious. And they've got like a matrix in the way that they value, and they mark it and saying, we're concerned about the market, or a little bit about oversupply. And there's comments like that are occurring probably in Melbourne, not so much Sydney. Sydney seems still relatively robust in the fact that people still want to be in there, and just not as amazing as it was. And I think Brisbane's interesting, where I've got some clients that are waiting for titles and that sort of stuff. So there seems to be, people are keen on that area at the moment, investment-wise. Owner-occupied, I think it's a hard market to cut into, regardless of whether it's Melbourne or Sydney, or maybe even Brisbane a little bit, because the price is still relatively high for that first home buyer. So, and they're not the people I see. They probably more want to deal with someone directly in that state.
Sure.
Yeah.
So generally when a market's going quite strong in an area and the investor's quite keen, obviously the investant loan is something that's quite prominent. In a market that's a bit flatter or in a downward cycle, what would you see most clients, what sort of products are they looking to refinance or finance with the broker at this point in time?
I think, I mean, the rate's amazing. Let's not be, we've never really seen rates like this. I mean, I've had properties, and I'm relatively young, that were, you know, approaching 10. So we're getting the 9s, we're getting, you know, it was like people were thinking I better fix my rate before it hits 10%. That was the sort of thing that I experienced with my own ownership of property. But when we come back down to the market now, we're looking at, we got 3s, you know, high 3s across most of the board. Some investment lending's hitting in the 3s, so like a 399 sort of stuff from a rate perspective. But then you've also got like a lower sort of mid 3s or mid to highest 3s, like 3.7-ish, where the owner occupied property. And I guess it's the main change recently is that the banks have really separated owner occupied and investment lending, distinguished it, created different policies, made it better for owner occupied to do stuff than necessarily if you want to buy an investment property. And I think that's obviously that's an adjustment from like APRA, which is the governing body for the banks, making some changes to say, hey, you can't lend that much in investment. But I also think that's the banks also, owner-occupieds tend to pay their debts off more, better, like the risk is perceived less because the person's actually living in the property. So refinance is big. Like, you know, banks are complacent. They'll keep you on the 5 point something if they can. You can just walk around the corner and ask, I guess, your broker or probably even the bank that you're with to relook at your rate, and they'll probably give you somewhere in the 4s and maybe in the 3s, depending on where you sit in your world of lending. So,
Right.
Yeah.
And how many lenders and different products would you deal with as a broker?
Well, I mean, I have access to quite a large bank of lenders, I guess, like, I'll put my hand up, so Mortgage Choice is the aggregator group that I fall under, and, you know, so we've got 25, 30 odd different sort of lenders, and then they've all got hundreds of products. Really, like, there's the niche ones, the ones that are for people that are trying to do something specific or to have a really specific income. There's those sort of lenders which group up, and then there's obviously the major 4, and probably some, I'll call them like second tier lenders that just sort of sit underneath, where they're grabbing really on rate and giving good product. They might not necessarily have the branch network or the you know, the brand recognition that the big 4 have, but they're offering a really good product. And I'm seeing the shift from the 4 majors to those sort of lenders with a lower fee, lower rate potentially, if you fit them. You have to be a pretty strong client normally, because they're offering it to you at certain loan to value ratios. Normally, you know, as long as you're not in lenders, mortgage insurance and stuff, will give you this amazing deal. And the banks are trying to match it, but they only do matching. They don't advertise.
Sure.
So the major 4 aren't going to advertise the best rate that they give. You really need a broker or a really good person in a branch that's going to go and negotiate actually with the credit team and say, hey, what can we do, rate, and then you might get close to the rate.
And just also from my personal aspect, when dealing with banks as compared to brokers, I also found that, and a lot of people make this mistake, they go to their bank that they've always banked with, and they might go along with their particular set of circumstance, talk to the bank, and the bank might only have 3 products that they're prepared to offer, and your criteria might not fit those. So then the bank will say, no, we can't help you. A lot of people will be knocked back at that point and say, look, I can't get finance, I'm not going anywhere else, that's it. However, when I go to a broker, I put my scenario with the broker, and the broker can then look across all banks, all products, and determine that product for me and say, well, look, these are the banks who will work with you. Let's go and talk to that bank that and look at that particular product, and then suddenly you've got a lot more options than just going to that one bank. Is that something that you see sometimes?
I mean, the reality is that if you work at a bank and you're the guy sitting at the desk and someone's coming to you asking you can only offer them what what your bank does.
And also what you're trained in.
And yeah, what you're trained in. I mean, there's certain levels, like if you want commercial lending and stuff, so it goes to a different team and stuff like that. So that's the reality. I'm sure if I had that job, I would want to be able to offer other products, but you can't. And so that, hence why I'm doing this, is because you want to give people that flexibility. Like, there might be a first time buyer, have a certain level of deposit, but they've always banked with this bank. Mm-hmm. And it's just not going to work. But there might be another really good bank that loves first time buyers. Or it's the same for investors. It might be like, well, or now you're self-employed. So I'm self-employed, but I've only really been doing it for a year and a bit. So certain banks are going to be better because they'll say, okay, well, we'll use 1 year's financials compared to we're going to need 2 years financials. So that's the mix of, sometimes it's not always about rate. There's great rates, don't get me wrong, but sometimes it's more about who's going to suit the person the best. Their circumstances are, everyone's different, I'm not the same as you are, and we all have different ways that we get our income and,
sure.
The properties and the savings that we have, and so that might determine that someone else is better than someone else. So
that's great.
It's nice to be able to offer that, because it's actually what I care about. I do really care that the product's right for someone, and whether you use me or another broker, the whole point is that the broker needs to actually care about it, not necessarily just say, here's a good product, it's got a good rate. Yeah. Well, why is that? Is there...
And you're not, like in a big institution like a bank, you might find that the bank, you're just a number. Whereas, and once they've got that deal, they may never see you again. Whereas a broker is about a relationship, and you will build a long-term relationship and always be looking out for that person.
The relationship for me is more valuable than how I make my money. Like the relationship means that I'm fulfilled in my job. I mean, that's just me as a broker, or probably as a business person, that I actually care about that. But I do think that, if you educate and you help people understand what they're getting into, then they're going to want to refer you, and they're going to want to use you because you've given them so much value in your service. That's why I'm here. I'm here to give value. If you just want some numbers and to find out the best thing, you can go online. I need to create a reason that you want to use me. And so that is probably the main reason that I feel is that if I'm good at my job, I educate, I help, I assist, I show while I'm good, they're going to want to come back and use me again. And they're not a cog in the machine to me. They're a speed dial in my phone, and their name comes up and I call them and I remember them. And I say, hey, it was great to speak to you. How's that thing going that you did 2 years ago? And that's so important. That's why I think the broker's important. Whether it's me or someone else, like that's my take on being a mortgage broker. Sure. Is you can't really replace that human interaction that means that I care about what you're trying to do. So,
excellent.
Yeah.
Now look, one thing also, I have some people who say, well, yeah, but if I use a broker, then I've got to pay extra. If I go to the bank, I'm going to get a better deal and I don't have to pay extra fees. Could you just clarify that for us, how that works?
I mean, something that I do with every client
Sure.
is, and I sit there at the beginning and it's like, I want you to know how it works. So I explain the spiel about how I care, but then I also explain how I get paid. And ultimately it doesn't cost the customer everything. The bank is paying me for referring, basically, the client to them. And the branch, they're not going to really, they don't discriminate. They're not meant to discriminate the difference between if someone comes into a branch or if someone comes in through a broker network. They still probably relatively, there's not the cost associated with the individual that they're employing at a branch. So therefore they're technically outsourcing to brokers. They're not paying us what they pay a person that works in a branch. And so that's how we get it, and it's purely like results driven. So you get that loan, you pick up the keys to your first house and you move in, I get paid then. That could take 2 years. It could mean I've got clients that it's been 3 years, that we've started the process and it's taken that long until they've saved, they've got to the point, found the right property, got the offer accepted, and now they're in the property, and now I get paid. And you know, people will say, well, that's not a very good return on investment, but I believe that is the process, and that's why the value is there. There's not really a cost. I don't think to a client there's not a cost difference. We're just adding value, and it's not costing them any difference. And they can call me at 7 o'clock at night, at 8 o'clock at night, 1 o'clock on a Sunday when they're at the auction or the property looking at it, wanting to ask some advice. I'm sure they can't do that at a bank.
Exactly.
So
No, great.
that's the stuff, and it doesn't really cost. It doesn't cost them anything. I'm not charging. Well, I don't charge anything to clients to use me. Yeah.
Just finally, what advice would you give to someone? Let's say it's the first time or the third time they're coming along, but before they sit down with a broker to discuss their scenario, what are just a couple of things that would be really handy for that person to have already in play before they sat down with you to discuss what they need in their finance? What are a couple of pointers you could give them?
Well, I mean, I guess everyone wants to know if they can afford what it is, or have they done the right things, or in a suitable situation to actually do what they think that they can do.
So with like having their recent pay slips?
Oh yeah, look, obviously there's
things like that.
In
Just
summary,
organised?
it's like, show me what your income is.
Yeah.
Is that from rental properties? Is that from a job? Are you self-employed? That's the income. And then show me what your expenses are. Like, what do you spend stuff on? Do you live the high life? Do you have car loans, personal loans? Those sort of things really matter. And so I look at in summary, I look at those things and I put them together and mix it, and we look at the calculators of the banks and stuff like that, and end up with the result of who's going to lend you the money. And that's probably where, in summary, it's not too stressful because we take that out. I simplify it and say, I really need your income stuff and your expense stuff. You give me that and I can work with that, and then I'll work out the numbers and stuff for you. I mean, if you're starting to get to the point that you're plugging in those numbers and trying to work it out yourself, maybe you need to rethink what you're doing. Is that person actually putting the effort in for you to warrant to use them? And so that's being prepared that I'm going to ask questions. I mean, I know more about my customers for those 2, 3, 4 weeks that I'm actually doing the deal and putting them and getting them the loan than probably their best friend does. They're like my best friends for 2, 3 weeks, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's just like I know a lot about them, and I am going to ask them a lot because, well, correspondingly, the bank is going to ask all those questions, and it depends on the bank. Every bank will. Some banks will ask more questions than other banks. So, again, if the product suits and is simple and you're a pretty vanilla thing, then it might be I only need some pay slips, some saving statements, let's go ahead, we can do this. Or if it's complex and I'll need your business stuff, I'll need to see the company structure, I'll need to see all of those things, then that's going to take time. So I think it's just about understanding that a broker is normally there because I'm there for the relationship and for the life. Hopefully the customer is, I'm there for when they buy their first home. But then my knowledge isn't just that. My knowledge is like, okay, well, they want to now start a business or they want to buy their first investment property. Okay, this is potentially the sort of what a bank's going to want to see if you're going to do that. Or I'm buying my 15th investment property. Okay, we need to take into account all these different structures that those clients have with trusts and companies and things like that that will change the way their lending is. So everyone's different. In summary, it's income expense, and that could mean a lot of paperwork for income and a lot of paperwork for expense, or it could be as simple as some pay slips and a couple of bits of paper for expense. So it just depends, yeah.
Excellent. Well, look, thank you very much for speaking to me today, David.
Yeah,
I think
sure.
that gave everyone a really good insight into what mortgage broking is about and how mortgage brokers can help out in the industry. And next time that you have to get finance for anything that you're looking at, maybe it's worth considering a broker rather than just going straight to one bank or one finance institution. Maybe broaden your aspect and see if you can get the best deal out there in the market. But I'd just like to thank David. So thanks, David, for coming along.
Thanks, mate.
I appreciate that.
No problem.
And,
I hope it helped people. I mean, look, you can always, I guess, ask questions, and Brad will post this.
Sure.
Ask questions, and I'm sure he'll tell me what I need to answer.
Sure. And look, if you ever need to find David, he'll be linked to our website as well, so that you can always contact David if you're looking for finance advice.
Cool.
But thanks, and have a great day.